Right now, 9 plants in your yard are making a decision, and they're not waiting for you. Not waiting for the heat to break. Not waiting for September. They're deciding this week whether you get a jaw-dropping spring garden, or whether you spend April staring at bare, disappointing sticks, wondering what went wrong. Here's what's going to sting. Most of those plants look completely fine right now. No yellow leaves. No wilting. They look healthy. They look happy. And that's exactly why most gardeners miss this window every single year. Because nothing looks wrong until spring, the damage is done, and there's nothing left to do but wait. Today, 9 plants, exactly where to cut, exactly how much to take, and just as important, exactly where to put your shears down and walk away. Because with several of these, the wrong cut does more damage than no cut at all. One plant on today's list can be permanently damaged by a single wrong cut. Not weakened. Not set back for a season. Permanently. I'm saving which one for the moment it'll actually stick. And there's one plant where the single smartest thing you can do in August is nothing at all. I'll show you the science, and it'll change the way you think about this month in the garden. If you're not subscribed, do it now. Every video on this channel is built around a specific window in your garden calendar. Miss the window, miss the results. The algorithm won't remember what your yard needs next month. I will. Let's get into it. Here's something worth sitting with before we get into the plants. Most American gardeners treat August like a waiting room. Too hot to plant. Too early for fall cleanup. Nothing to do but drag a hose around and complain about the humidity. And honestly, that feeling makes complete sense. August doesn't look like a busy month in the garden. But here's what's actually happening while you're inside with the air conditioning. Your plants are working. Quietly, invisibly, doing some of the most important biological work of their entire year. Manufacturing the buds that become next spring's flowers. Shipping energy down into their roots. Building the reserves that determine how explosively they perform come April and May. Making decisions about next year's display right now, in the heat, in the silence, while most people have mentally checked out. That's what makes August pruning the most consequential gardening decision of the year, and the most under-discussed. Now, the 9 plants we're covering don't all need the same thing from you. Some need a precise, confident cut. Some need you to hold back completely when every instinct is telling you to tidy up. And a few will punish you not for cutting wrong, but for cutting right at the wrong time. That's the harder mistake to see coming. And it's the reason perfectly healthy-looking gardens produce mediocre results year after year, while the gardener stands there completely baffled. This isn't about tidying your yard. This is about what your yard looks like when your neighbors are standing in front of it next May, asking you what your secret is. Let's talk about the 9 plants. Plant 1, Butterfly Bush. Hydrangea Davidii USDA zones 5 to 9. Let's start with the plant that rewards the boldest cut and punishes the timid one. Butterfly Bush. If you've got one right now, there's a good chance it's covered in long, arching flower spikes. Some still going strong, some faded and brown at the tips, starting to look ragged. And the instinct most people have in August is to leave it alone. It's still blooming. Why touch it? Here's why. Butterfly bush blooms on new wood. Growth it produces this season. Every spent flower spike you leave on that plant right now is wood and energy that could be going toward a fresh flush of blooms before first frost. In most of the country, you've still got 6 to 8 weeks of growing season left. That's enough time for a genuine second wave of color if you act now. Here's what to do. Cut those spent flower spikes back by 1/3 to halfway, right above a healthy leaf node. New buds form almost immediately below the cut. Within 2 to 3 weeks, a second flush running deep into September. Sometimes October, depending on your zone. What you do not touch is the main woody framework. That's not an August job. Hard structural pruning, cutting the whole plant back close to the ground, happens in late winter when the plant is dormant. Touch that framework now and you're removing the energy reserves it needs to survive winter. Spent blooms. Go after them aggressively. The bones. Leave them completely alone. Now I want an honest answer in the comments. Have you ever been too scared to cut something back hard, and regretted it when the plant underperformed the following season? Tell me the plant, the year, and how long it took you to finally pick up the shears. I read every comment before I planned the next video, and you are not the only one who stood there frozen, afraid to make the wrong move. Plant 2 climbing roses. Rosa USDA zones 4 to 9. Now we move into slightly thornier territory. Literally. Climbing and rambling roses, and I want to be specific. I'm talking about the big scramblers. The ones that have taken over an arbor, woven through a fence, climbed halfway up a wall like they're making a permanent home there. Not your tidy little shrub roses. The wild, sprawling, slightly unruly ones that look spectacular in June and spend the rest of summer daring you to touch them. I got a message last summer from a viewer in Tennessee. She sent me a photo of a climbing rose that had completely consumed her back fence. Beautiful plant. Absolutely massive. She hadn't touched it in 4 years because she was terrified of doing it wrong. For years, the rose had won. Here's the thing about ramblers. They put on their big early summer show on what they grew the previous year. By August, that show is finished, which means right now is the ideal window for structural work. The new canes pushing from the base have the rest of the season to mature and harden before any real cold arrives. You're not cutting away next year's flowers. You're making room for them. Start where you should always start: dead, damaged, and diseased wood first. Get all the way inside the plant. Roses grow so densely that dead canes get buried deep in the tangle, quietly rotting where you'd never see them from the outside. Don't skim the surface. Then comes the renewal cut. Find roughly 1 in 3 of the oldest canes, thicker, darker, sometimes peeling bark compared to the bright green of new growth, and remove them completely at ground level. This does 2 things at once. Opens the plant so light and air move through it, cutting fungal problems dramatically, and signals the plant to push vigorous new canes from the base. That's exactly where your best future flowers come from. One more thing: wear gloves that cover your wrists. And when hauling a long thorny cane out of a dense rambler, cut it into 2 or 3 shorter sections as you work it free. Don't try to yank the whole thing out in one move. It will fight you. Your forearms will thank you. Here's your trick for next summer's display. Take those strong new green canes and train them as close to horizontal as your support allows. A cane running sideways blooms along its entire length. A cane pointing straight up gives you one small cluster way up high where nobody can enjoy it. Small change. An enormous difference comes in June. What is the most out-of-control plant you've ever been too afraid to touch? And how long did it go completely untouched? Drop the plant, the years, and the damage report below. I want the most dramatic answer this section produces. Plant 3 lavender. Lavender USDA zones 5 to 9. Stop what you're doing and pay attention to this one. Not because I'm being dramatic, because this is the plant I get the most heartbroken messages about. People who did everything right, made one cut that seemed completely reasonable, and watched their plant die section by section over the following year with no idea why. Lavender is not like anything else in your garden. Underneath all that silvery, fragrant foliage, it's building a woody skeleton, hard, gray, and almost completely bare. Think of it as a miniature tree wearing a costume made of herbs. That skeleton is everything. It determines whether your lavender lives a long, beautiful life, or turns into a splayed open, dying mess by year 5 or 6. Here's the mistake I see constantly. Someone has a lavender that's gotten ragged, sprawled open in the middle, bare gray wood showing through the center, a thin fringe of green clinging to the outer edges. The completely reasonable, completely human instinct is to cut it back hard and give it a fresh start. That instinct will kill it. That old gray wood carries almost no dormant buds. Cut into it and it doesn't push back. It doesn't recover. It just sits there, dead wood in a living plant, and that section never returns. You haven't pruned it. You've amputated it. And there is no undoing that cut. So here's your August job, and it's simpler than you think. Once the flower spikes have faded, trim lightly across the soft green growth only. Remove about 1/3, no more. Shape it into a low, rounded dome, like a loaf of bread sitting in your border. That shape isn't just for looks. It sheds water off the crown instead of letting it pool in the center, which matters enormously in a wet winter. Sitting water rots a lavender plant from the inside out. The rule is this: never cut into the bare gray wood. If you're standing there squinting at a stem, trying to decide whether it's green enough, that hesitation is your answer. Back off. Cut higher. Caution costs you nothing. A mistake costs you the plant. If this channel has ever saved you from a mistake you didn't know you were about to make, this is the moment to subscribe. Next month, I'm covering a pruning error with a completely different plant that's just as permanent and just as preventable. I don't want you finding out about it after it's already done. Have you ever lost a lavender to a hard cut you thought was helping it? Or are you realizing right now that you've been crossing that gray wood line for years without knowing it? Confess below. Whatever you did, someone else in this comment section did the exact same thing. Quick question, how many times have you replanted the same tomatoes, the same basil, the same peppers? Every single spring? Same cart, same garden center, same cycle. What if you only had to plant it once? That's literally the idea behind Plant Once, my perennial starter checklist and zone guide. Find your zone in under 5 minutes. Know exactly what to plant first. And build a garden that comes back year after year, without you lifting a finger every spring. Plant it once. Harvest it for years. Links in the description, or scan the QR code on your screen to get your copy right now. Let's stop starting over. Plant 4, bigleaf hydrangea. Hydrangea macrophylla USDA zones 5 to 9. This is the plant that generates more frustrated messages than anything else I cover. Not angry, frustrated. From people who watered correctly, fertilized, had zero pest problems, did everything by the book, and watched their hydrangea produce nothing but beautiful, lush, completely flowerless green growth year after year. 3 years. For years. Sometimes longer. And in almost every single case, the reason is the same. Their own hands. Here is the biology, and once you understand it, you will never make this mistake again. A bigleaf hydrangea sets its flower buds for next summer on the stems standing in your yard right now. Every single stem out there today is quietly carrying next year's entire flower show inside it. Right now. In August. So when you cut those stems back in fall because they look untidy, or worse, cut them hard in early spring because they look rough after winter and you want a clean start, you are not pruning the plant. You are erasing next year's flowers before they ever had a chance to open. Every single time. This is, without competition, the most common reason a perfectly healthy hydrangea produces nothing but leaves while the owner stands in the yard completely baffled. So what do you actually do in August? One thing. Smaller than you think. Deadhead only. Find a faded flower head, follow that stem down to the first fat, healthy pair of buds in the leaf joint, and cut just above it. A few inches. Nothing more. Everything below that cut is next year's display. Your only job is to protect it. Quick note, if you're growing a panicle or smooth hydrangea, the cone-shaped or white snowball types, you have more flexibility because they bloom on new growth each spring. But even then, hold any real structural cut until late winter. August still isn't the month for it. One more thing that has nothing to do with pruning, but will do more for next year's blooms than any cut you make. Water. Bigleaf hydrangeas have enormous leaves, shallow roots, and lose moisture faster than almost anything else in your yard. A hydrangea that dries out in August while forming those buds simply sets fewer of them. There's no cutting your way out of drought stress. A deep soak at the base once or twice a week during hot spells. In the morning, not over the leaves. Protects the exact display you've been waiting all year to see. I need an honest number in the comments. How many years did you fall prune or spring prune your hydrangea? Feeling good about how tidy your yard looked, without knowing you were cutting off your own flowers. Don't give me the answer that sounds good. Give me the real number, because I guarantee it's higher than anyone wants to say out loud. If you're just finding this channel, subscribe now. This is exactly what I cover every single month. Before the damage happens, not after. Plant 5 Clematis. Clematis USDA zones 4 to 9. Clematis trips people up the most. Not because the pruning is physically difficult, but because there isn't one right answer. There are 3. And which one applies to you depends entirely on which variety you're growing. Get the group wrong and you'll either cut off next year's flowers entirely, or leave a plant that desperately needed cutting in a tangled, unproductive mess. Either way, you lose a season. Here's how it breaks down. Group 1, your early bloomers. Flowered before June? Almost certainly Group 1. Your August job? Essentially nothing. Maybe a light tidy to remove dead or damaged stems. Any significant cut now removes buds already forming for next spring. Put the shears away. Group 2, your large-flowered hybrids. The big, dramatic blooms most people picture when they think of clematis. They bloom twice, once on old wood in late spring, once on new growth in summer. In August, lightly deadhead spent summer blooms, cutting back to a strong pair of buds. Don't go further than that. Group 3, this is where you actually get to cut, and cut with confidence. Group 3 varieties bloom entirely on new growth produced each season. By August, if yours has finished its main flush, cut back hard, down to about 12 inches from the ground. The plant will push vigorous new growth that sets up for an explosive performance next year. Now, most people threw away the plant tag years ago and have no idea which group they're in. Here's how to figure it out. Think about when it bloomed and what those blooms looked like. Early spring, smaller flowers, Group 1. Big, dramatic, bloom twice, Group 2. Late summer, vigorous, scrambling, almost certainly Group 3. Still not sure? Don't cut. A skipped pruning season costs you some tidiness. A wrong cut costs you a year of flowers. Do you actually know which pruning group your clematis is? Or are you in the lost the tag 4 years ago and just been guessing camp? Tell me what color it is and roughly when it blooms. Drop it below and let's figure it out together. Plant 6, Wisteria. Wisteria USDA zones 4 to 9. If you've got wisteria, you already know it doesn't negotiate. You either manage it on your schedule or it manages your yard on its own schedule. And its schedule involves consuming every structure within reach and answering to no one. But here's what most people don't realize about wisteria in August. The summer pruning you do right now is not the main event. That's January. What August is about is something more specific and more important for next year's flowers than most gardeners understand. Right now, your wisteria is pushing out long, whippy new shoots in every direction, several feet in a single season. And every bit of energy going into those untrained shoots is energy not going into the flower buds forming along the main framework. The summer trim is about redirecting that energy, cutting those long new side shoots back to 5 or 6 leaves from where they join the main stem. That's it. Clean, simple, and it makes an enormous difference to how freely the plant blooms next spring. What you do not touch in August is the main framework. No structural cuts, no major removal. That work happens in January or February when the plant is fully dormant and you can actually see what you're dealing with without 10,000 leaves in the way. One more thing, because I get this question constantly. If your wisteria has never bloomed, or blooms weakly after years of growing, the problem is almost never pruning. It's usually one of two things. Too much nitrogen, which pushes leafy green growth at the expense of flowers, or roots that have never been stressed enough to trigger the plant's flowering instinct. Wisteria is a survivor. It flowers most freely when it feels like it has something to prove. Is your wisteria flowering the way you hoped? Or have you been waiting years for a bloom that never quite materializes? Tell me how long you've had it, what you've tried, and what your yard looks like right now. I want wisteria horror stories. The longer and more dramatic, the better. Plant 7, peach and nectarine trees. Prunus persica USDA zones 5 to 9. Most people only think about pruning fruit trees in late winter. For most fruit trees, that's fine. Peach and nectarine trees are the exception, and the reason comes down to a disease most American home gardeners have never heard of until it's already cost them a harvest. Peach leaf curl. A fungal disease that overwinters in the crevices of bark, in infected wood, in the hidden spaces of a tree that looks completely fine from 10 feet away. Come spring, it announces itself through crinkled, distorted, reddish foliage that devastates a tree's ability to photosynthesize and set fruit. And by the time you see it, the infection was already there, sitting in your tree all winter while you weren't looking. This is why August matters. Right now, while the tree is actively growing and fully leafed out, you can see the structure clearly. Crossing branches rubbing against each other and creating wounds. Water shoots, those fast, vertical, completely unproductive growth spikes. Open up the canopy so air moves through it freely. That airflow is your single best defense against fungal problems of every kind. What you're doing in August is not a dramatic overhaul. Remove roughly 1 in 4 of the most problematic branches. Anything crossing, anything congested, anything dead or showing signs of disease. The goal is a canopy that lets light penetrate and air circulate. A tree that dries out after rain instead of sitting in trapped humidity all day. This feels counterintuitive. Cutting a fruit tree in summer feels wrong to almost everyone the first time. Trust the biology. The tree handles it. The wound heals cleanly in warm weather, and you go into winter with a healthier structure and a fighting chance against the diseases waiting in the bark around it. Are you growing peaches or nectarines? And have you ever dealt with peach leaf curl? That crinkled, discolored early spring foliage that appears before you've done anything at all? Tell me your zone. Tell me what happened. And tell me whether you knew what you were looking at the first time you saw it. Because most people don't. And that's exactly why it spreads. Plant 8 peonies. Peonia lactiflora USDA zones 3 to 8. Peonies are one of the toughest, longest-lived perennials you can grow. Some outlive the person who planted them by decades. They're not fragile. They don't need much. But they have one very specific way of punishing you, and it arrives silently 6 months after the fact with no warning and no explanation attached. They don't punish you for cutting the wrong thing. They punish you for cutting the right thing at the wrong time. Here's what's happening underneath those big, glossy leaves right now. All spring and all summer, every green leaf on your peony has been working like a small factory, manufacturing sugars and shipping them straight down into thick storage roots underground. Those reserves are the entire reason you get flowers next May. Every single leaf still standing green is still earning its keep, still filling the tank for next year's performance. So when someone cuts a perfectly healthy peony down in late August because the border looks rough and they want it tidied, they've just pulled money directly out of their own account. The plant survives, comes back, and then it barely blooms, and the gardener stands there the following May completely mystified. Your August job has exactly 3 parts. First, remove seed pods. If your flowers have faded and set seed, producing those seeds costs the plant energy it should be storing for next year. Follow the spent flower stem down to a healthy set of leaves and cut just above it. Second, go disease hunting. August is when botrytis blight and leaf fungal diseases make their move. Look for brown blotches, dark spots, or any stem that's collapsed at the base. Anything showing those symptoms comes off all the way to ground level and goes in the trash, not the compost. The spores will overwinter in compost and reinfect the plant next spring as reliably as anything you've ever dealt with in the garden. Third, and this requires genuine self-control, leave every healthy green leaf completely alone. Do not cut a green peony down for the sake of a tidy border. Wait until the leaves yellow and die back on their own timeline, usually late August into September depending on your zone. Only then cut down to just above ground level. One quick note. If you're growing a tree peony rather than the standard herbaceous kind, this rule doesn't apply. Tree peonies keep their woody framework year-round. Never cut them to the ground. Deadhead. Remove anything dead or broken, and leave the rest alone. Have you ever had a plant that looked completely healthy? Full, green, 0 visible problems, and just quietly failed to perform when it mattered? Not dead. Just let you down season after season without explanation. Tell me which plant did that to you, and tell me how long it took to figure out why. Because that slow, quiet disappointment is one of the most genuinely frustrating things in gardening, and I want to know if peonies are the plant that did it to you, or if something else beat them to it. Plant 9, ornamental grasses. Various USDA zones 3 to 9. We've spent this entire video talking about exactly where to cut and exactly how much. Every plant so far has had a specific action, a specific amount, a specific technique. This last plant is where I'm going to ask you to do the hardest thing in gardening. Put the shears away. Do nothing. I mean that completely. Ornamental grasses are one of the most widely planted low-maintenance perennials across every USDA zone in this country. And August is not their month. Not even close. Right now, your grasses are building their seed heads. Those tall, feathery plumes you're either admiring or planning to cut off are exactly what gives you winter interest when everything else in the border has died back to nothing. They catch frost on a gray January morning and hold it like something out of a painting. They feed goldfinches and sparrows straight through the cold months. Birds clinging sideways to those seed heads. working them for their next meal in a way that is genuinely one of the more charming things your yard will offer all winter long. Cutting now doesn't just remove this season's beauty. It removes the food source, the structure, and the visual interest your yard would have carried for the next 4 to 5 months, at zero additional effort on your part. The cut for ornamental grasses happens in late winter. Late February to early March for most of the country, just before new growth begins pushing from the base. Cut them back hard then, down to 4 to 6 inches from the ground, and they'll explode back with fresh growth that makes the whole plant look like it was just installed. One exception worth knowing. If your grass has developed a completely dead center, the middle of the clump has died out, leaving a living ring around a dead hole, August is actually a reasonable time to divide rather than wait. Dig the whole clump, split it apart, discard the dead center, and replant the healthy outer divisions. They'll have just enough season left to establish before the cold arrives. But for the vast majority of ornamental grasses in the vast majority of American yards, August is a hands-off month. Let it finish what it started. Are you a cut the grasses back in fall for a tidy yard gardener? Or a leave them standing all winter for the birds and the frost gardener? Tell me which camp you're in and why, because I genuinely don't think either answer is wrong. It depends entirely on what you want out of your yard between November and March. But I want both sides. Drop it below. Alright, let's lock this in before you head outside. 9 plants. One rule that matters most for each. And the thing that costs you a season if you get it wrong. Butterfly bush. Zones 5 to 9. Cut spent flower spikes back by 1/3 to halfway, right above a healthy leaf node. You've still got enough season left for a genuine second flush before frost. Do not touch the main woody framework. That's a late winter job. Climbing roses. Zones 4 to 9. Get inside the plant. Remove 1 in 3 of the oldest, darkest canes at ground level. Train strong new green canes as close to horizontal as your support allows. A cane running sideways blooms along its entire length. Wear gloves that cover your wrists. Cut canes into sections as you remove them. Lavender. Zones 5 to 9. Trim lightly across the soft green growth only, about 1/3 off the top, shaped into a low rounded dome. Never cut into the bare gray wood underneath. If you're hesitating about whether a stem is green enough, that hesitation is your answer. Back off. Every other mistake on today's list costs you a season. Lavender costs you the plant. Bigleaf hydrangea. Zones 5 to 9. Deadhead only. Find the faded flower, follow the stem down to the first fat pair of buds in the leaf joint. Cut just above it. A few inches. That is the entire job. Every stem standing in your yard right now is already carrying next year's complete flower display. Your only job is to protect it. Clematis. Zones 4 to 9. Know your group before you touch anything. Group 1. Early spring bloomer, hands off. Group 2. Large flowered, blooms twice. Light deadhead of spent summer blooms only. Group 3. Late summer, vigorous scrambler, cut back hard to about 12 inches. Not sure which group? Don't cut. A skipped season costs you tidiness. A wrong cut costs you a year of flowers. Wisteria. Zones 4 to 9. Cut long new side shoots back to 5 or 6 leaves from the main stem. That's it. You're redirecting energy away from leafy growth and toward the flower buds forming right now. Do not touch the main structure. That's a January job. Peach and nectarine trees. Zones 5 to 9. Open the canopy. Remove crossing branches, water shoots, anything showing signs of disease. The goal is a tree that light can penetrate and air can move through freely. One that dries out after rain instead of sitting in trapped humidity that overwinters quietly and announces itself in spring when it's already too late. Peonies. Zones 3 to 8. 3 things only. Remove seed pods from spent flowers. Hunt down anything showing brown blotches or collapse. Cut to ground level, trash it, not the compost. Then leave every healthy green leaf completely alone until it yellows on its own timeline. The green leaves are still working. Cutting them early is pulling money straight out of your own account. Ornamental grasses. Zones 3 to 9. Put the shears away. Come back in late February. Let the seed heads stand. Let the birds work them through winter. Let the frost do what frost does to a tall grass plume on a January morning. The cut comes in late winter. Not now. Not in fall. Late winter. 9 plants. None of them need a whole weekend. None need expensive equipment or 30 years of experience. What they need is about 20 minutes each, a sharp, clean pair of shears, wiped down with rubbing alcohol between plants, because a dull or dirty blade crushes a stem instead of cutting it, and a crushed wound in warm August air is an open invitation for fungal disease, and the willingness to stop at exactly the point where most people keep going. That's the whole secret behind everything we covered today. It was never about doing more. It was always about knowing exactly where to stop. One more thing before the close. Out of these 9 plants, which one are you walking outside to tackle first the moment this video ends? And which one are you most nervous about? Tell me both. Because the plant you're most nervous about is almost always the one that needs you the most. Before I let you go, I need to come back to something I said in the first 60 seconds. I made you a promise, and I don't make promises I don't keep. I told you one plant on today's list could be permanently damaged by a single wrong cut. Not weakened. Not set back for a season. Permanently. And I told you I was saving the confirmation for the moment it would actually stick. That plant was lavender. Every other mistake on today's list costs you a bloom cycle at worst. A missed flush. A smaller display. A season where your yard underperforms and you know exactly why and you fix it next year. Those mistakes are recoverable. Gardening is a long game, and recoverable mistakes are just part of playing it. Lavender is the exception. Cross into that bare gray wood even once, even on what feels like a small, unimportant stem, and that section does not come back. Not this year. Not next year. Not ever. The plant doesn't forgive that cut. It quietly dies back from that point and never fills in again. And by the time you realize what happened, the cut is months old and there is nothing left to do but live with it. I want that to stay with you, not to make you afraid to touch your lavender, but to make you precise about it. There is a difference between fear and precision. Fear keeps the shears in the garage. Precision picks them up, makes the right cut with confidence, and puts them back down before crossing the line. That's the gardener I'm trying to help you become. I want to share something before we close. A viewer wrote to me. She'd been gardening for over 25 years. Self-taught. No formal training, no YouTube when she started. Just decades of trial and error in the same backyard. The same beds, the same plants coming back year after year. And she told me that the thing that changed her gardening the most, after all those years, after every technique learned and every mistake made, wasn't some advanced method she discovered late in the game. Not a new tool. Not a better fertilizer. Not finally figuring out her soil. It was learning to trust that doing less at the right moment was sometimes the entire answer. She'd spent years assuming a productive gardener was a busy one. Shears constantly in hand. Always tidying, always cutting something back. It took her a long time, and more than a few lost plants, to understand that some of her best blooming years came from the seasons she held back the most. The seasons she put the tools down early and let the plants finish what they'd started. I think about that constantly, because most of us come to gardening carrying that same assumption, that effort is the whole game. That more cutting, more control equals better results. And the 9 plants we covered today are quietly, patiently telling you the opposite. Knowing when to stop is its own kind of skill. Maybe the hardest one to develop, because it doesn't feel like doing anything at all in the moment. No satisfying bucket of clippings. No visible evidence of a good decision. Just trust and then waiting for May to prove you right. That's worth sitting with. Here's what I want from you now. First, go outside this week. Not this weekend. This week. Pick whichever of these 9 plants sits closest to your back door and start there. You don't need the whole afternoon. 20 minutes, a sharp pair of shears, and everything you just learned. The window is open right now. August does not wait for anyone to feel completely ready. Second, subscribe. I'll say this once and say it plainly. What I do here is entirely calendar-driven. A tip about hydrangeas doesn't help you in November. A warning about lavender doesn't save your plant in February. These videos only do their job if they reach you at the right time, before the window closes, not after. Subscribe now and the algorithm puts next month's video in front of you when it matters. Don't subscribe and you're trusting a platform that has never once looked out your back window to know what your yard needs next. That's not a bet worth making with a plant you've been growing for 6 years. Third, share this with someone who needs it. A neighbor, a parent, a friend who has texted you a photo of a struggling plant sometime in the last year. A share takes 10 seconds. It might save someone else's lavender, someone else's hydrangea, someone else's entire spring garden from a mistake they're about to make this week without knowing it. Fourth, leave a comment. An honest one. Tell me which of these 9 plants you're most nervous to cut and why. Tell me the pruning mistake you made years ago that you still think about when you walk past that spot in the yard. Tell me your real hydrangea number. Tell me your wisteria horror story. I read every single comment before I plan the next video, because this audience tells me more about what actually needs covering than any research I could do on my own. Next month brings its own narrow window. A different set of plants, a different set of rules, and at least one mistake I'd bet almost nobody watching right now knows they're currently making in their own yard. I'm not telling you what it is today. You'll have to come back for that one. But here's the thing about next month's video. By the time most people find it, the window it covers will already be closing. That's how seasonal gardening works. That's how it's always worked. The gap between knowing something at the right time and knowing it 3 weeks too late is the entire difference between the garden you have and the garden you're capable of having. If you're subscribed, next month's video finds you when it matters. If you're not, your garden will remind you in spring. Just not the way you were hoping. Go outside this week. Sharpen those blades, wipe them down, and start with whichever plant is closest to your back door. You don't need the whole afternoon. You don't need to be an expert. You just need to start and stop at exactly the right moment. Next May, your yard will do the rest of the talking for you.